Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 10th of January, and we thank you for watching Alaska Weather Tonight. And we encourage you to stay up to date on your local weather information. You can do that easily by calling 1-800-472-0391 for the Alaska Weather Information Line. You can always find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. A little click here or there will take you to the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit's information. You can find information about the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center's forecast for rivers and streams in your area, as well as continued ice growth around the local rivers. You can find information about the latest tsunami there if you'd like to investigate what happened around the Honduras region last night and the tsunami the information that came out there. Or if you just like to check your local weather forecast, just a simple click will take you to the Fairbanks, Juneau, or Anchorage offices in the surrounding area. If you can't find what you want, feel free to email me anytime. I'm happy to look things up for you, see if I can't help you find the information that you need and get back to that on a regular basis. Or if you find something on this show that you don't like, you'd like to see more of, or you'd really like to change the way it looks, please do let me know. I'm happy to serve you as I can. Here's a look at the region in southeast for hazardous weather tonight. We're going to start with the orange shaded areas. This is going to be a little backwards because that's what's coming later on. We'll deal with the yellow thing here in just a minute. The orange shade is a winter storm watch. It looks like another round of snow is coming to your region, so generally north of Sitka, not including Sitka, all the way up toward Gustavus and Haines, and then around to the capital city in Juneau, southward toward Petersburg, but not really including Ketchikan or Annette or some of our outer areas like Craig and Klawock. It looks like a round of snow may accumulate in this region Friday night and into Saturday. But on top of that, areas in the south will probably see some snow, but it looks like enough warm air rushes right back in there and starts to change conditions enough that accumulation won't be as much as what you see in the orange shaded regions here. So that's Friday night and Saturday for your planning purposes. But one thing to keep in mind, though, is that warmer air is rushing in. That's probably going to change the ground cover that might be snow already to a little bit more of a glaze or an icy situation. So consider your activities there in that planning. Again, especially Friday night and into Saturday for all the orange shaded regions under a winter storm watch for Friday night and Saturday. A look up north, the yellow area, that's Klondike Highway, of course. We're still talking about wind chills down to 50 below tonight for the White Pass region. So if you're driving up to Klondike Highway or have people that are coming your way, make sure they know they've got maybe some extra supplies in their car. If you got to stop for just a few minutes, it only takes 30 minutes to get some wicked nasty frostbite there. So just be real careful. Wind chill advisory again tonight and into tomorrow, where the values may decrease a little bit away from that 50 below tonight to about 30 to 40 below during the daytime tomorrow. So wind chill advisory there for White Pass. Up north, we are talking about a wind chill advisory for the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. Generally along the Dalton Highway, you're expected to see wind chill values again around 45 below. So still looking pretty cold up that way. And then we get a little bit further north. It is also wind related for the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, also the upper Koyukuk and into the middle Yukon. Looking at wind advisories there for winds coming out of the east up to about 40 to 45 miles per hour. So, of course, that'll make it feel colder as well, but perhaps not as cold as what we're seeing a little bit further east. The wind will be moving, and if you're flying, if you are driving, plan on being interrupted a little bit by the wind. You'll probably notice that blowing around a little bit too. So loose objects, always a good idea to maybe tuck them around the corner and out of the wind for at least a little while. That will continue tonight and through tomorrow. Here's a look at the overall weather pattern, and like we were talking about yesterday, the overall pattern is shifting just a little bit. We've got a big area of high pressure out here across the western Yukon and across eastern Alaska. This has dropped temperatures down as cold as 28 below around Fairbanks earlier this morning. Now, if you've been in the interior for any length of time, or Fairbanks for that matter, you know that 28 probably isn't as cold as it should be for this time of the year, for at least the biggest, deepest round of cold, but that is the coldest temperature Fairbanks has seen this winter as far as I know. So that's where things are right there in Fairbanks. A lot of cold, a lot of dry air here, but the overall weather pattern is moving from southeast to northwest, and you can see that moisture streaming in from the Gulf. Here's another round of low pressure here, slinging moisture across the Alaska Peninsula and bringing some occasional wind gusts to areas in southwest and along the Alaska Peninsula. A little bit of rain and snow across the chain today, but for right now, a large part of southeast is in the clear. Now, this next round of weather will gradually swing in as we get into Friday night and Saturday. You'll see that meeting up with the cold air that's in place now across the western parts of the continent, and that's what's going to bring us a better chance of that snow. For many across South Central, the next round will probably develop as we get into Friday night and Saturday, too. A lot of this will focus on the Prince William Sound side, Kodiak Island, and areas along the Aleutian chain. The big, deep driving area of low pressure is still just a hair off the map, so really not a big concern for any major wind impacts at this point, and the seas may get a little choppy as a result. But coastal areas along the Gulf will be dealing with another round of winter weather, as you would expect, and the cold will continue. But the big, deepest cold is generally drifting off to the east and the south at this point. Now here's a look at low pressure sitting across the northern Gulf at 1,007 millibars, a high just shy of 1,040 millibars. And we have several waves of low pressure that are kind of forming in the lee side of ridges and hills across the interior. Overall, it is cold and pretty stable across the interior. Across the west, a little more unstable with more cloud cover and some patchy areas of rain. A little more solid there from the Alaska Peninsula out toward the eastern chain. Over Prince William Sound, things look pretty dry for the moment in southeast. And had a little bit of snow around Sparrowbond, out around Wainwright, and up toward Point Hope and Point Lay. Heavier snow was falling around the Kaktovik region, it looked like. Some of that could just be blowing around, but it looks like there will be some areas of fog as we head through tonight as the winds settle down a little bit. Watch for some blowing snow where the winds are moving across some of the higher mountain passes, but not any great areas, seeing a widespread area of blowing snow, so that's good news there. A pressure gradient still pretty tight and packed around southeast, so no doubt about it, you're going to have some gusts and across the inside passages, and there'll probably be some snow creeping in from west to east through your region there. A little bit better chance around Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula region down to Kodiak Island. And then southwest and the eastern chain, we'll see a low pressure system kind of creep up a little bit more. This is a little bit closer to the core, the strongest area of low pressure. That's at 963 millibars. Watch for areas of gales across the region and maybe some occasional stronger winds. Prince William Sound, or the Pribilofs, I should say, we'll see occasional rain mixed with snow, but it looks like warmer air is kind of trickling into your region, so a better chance that's going to stay on the rain side tonight and then back into rain and snow as we head into Thursday. Watch for some areas of wind across Norton Sound and Kotzebue Sound, and then waves of snow hitting some of the higher terrain in southwestern Alaska, but overall, fairly warm conditions there across southwest. Again, the tight pressure gradient lingers over southeast. And still, that frontal boundary is located just to your west and southwest offshore, but when we get into Friday night, that's going to creep just a little bit more inland, and that'll really be the focus for that snow development that we were talking about. Now, here's what happens as we get into Friday. Low pressure gets a little bit closer to South Central and Kodiak Island. That gives us a better chance for Prince William Sound side, rain and snow down to the Chugach and the Kenai Peninsula region, Kodiak Island, but you'll notice with this pattern that'll probably keep a lot of the Cook Inlet side fairly dry. Not completely dry, but mostly dry. And areas around the eastern Alaska range still have that tight pressure gradient as well. So don't be surprised if wind advisories are still a part of your forecast around the Tanana Flats region and Dalton Highway area. And then look at southeast. Snow is coming there with the front just sitting right along the offshore areas. That should help to be a decent snow driver for you and at least provide a chance for some accumulating snow. So keep your eyes on that. Across the Gulf, unsettled weather continues there, and rain and snow showers for a large area of the Bering Sea, but generally an offshore flow for the west coast. There may be a little bit of a better chance for snow formation in the YK Delta, Seward Peninsula, Unalakleet to Nome to Kotzebue up to Shishmaref, maybe even Kivalina there, and out across the central and western chain, gradually drying conditions, but still cloudy and somewhat unstable with the coldest air still just kind of lurking across the Alcan border. Speaking of cold, let's take a look at temperatures for tonight. Teens and 20s for southeast. Same goes for south central, but even colder. Many locations still in the single digits, but probably most areas plus side of 0. 35 around Kodiak, around Fairbanks, about 20 to 25 below, nearly 40 below in Northway, 35 below for Fort Yukon, teens and 20s below for the North Slope. For the Norton Sound region, anywhere from 0 to about 5 below. Southwestern Bristol Bay, mid to upper 20s, 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, the Pribilofs, and the chain with highs tomorrow in the teens and 20s. 30s and above freezing for most in Bristol Bay, and south and west closer to 40, including Kodiak. 20s for many in south central. Southeast, you're back in the low to mid 20s, maybe some 30s around Sitka down toward Ketchikan and Annette. For Fort Yukon, Northway and Eagle, anywhere from 15 to about 25 below for highs tomorrow, and 5 to 15 below for the North Slope. Ambler and Bettles, anywhere from 0 to about 10 below. As we get into low temperatures Friday morning, big cold is still hovering across the east, and it looks like high temperatures for your Friday will start to recover a little bit more with Eagle back to about 9 below, south central in the 30s and 40s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Time now for aviation weather, and as you look out to the south and west, you can see a wide swath of MVFR conditions. A lot of that moisture, though, coming in from the south will start to spread into Cook Inlet tonight and start to bring IFR into the Aleutian Range, especially on the Pacific side, and then into the eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula, with MVFR still holding a little bit out of southeast. Most of the interior will be generally VFR with some patchy MVFR as you head up to the Yukon Valley and on the other side of the Kuskokwim Valley as well. As we get into Thursday afternoon, not a lot of change for southeast of the Panhandle. The Copper River Basin still looking good. Most of the interior and the northern passes looking okay. You can see some patchy MVFR across parts of the lower and middle Yukon Valley as well as the lower Kuskokwim Valley, with IFR actually setting in there generally south of Bethel, though, along the Wood-Tikchik Mountains. And across the west, IFR conditions there for St. Matthew, and then generally north and east of St. Paul and St. George. MVFR continues for a wide swath of the Bering Strait, or Bering Sea, I should say. As we get into Friday, though, you will see MVFR heading up toward the Bering Strait, with IFR lingering for St. Matthew, St. Paul, and St. George. Some breakup of the MVFR around Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, and then as you look eastward, that southerly push of moisture still kind of creeping its way northward, but holding out of southeast. So really not a whole lot of change as we go from Thursday morning and then back to Friday morning. As we get into Friday afternoon, though, you can see that slug of moisture is moving eastward once again and moving into southeast, with IFR conditions starting to develop across the northern outer coast, so not terribly widespread just yet for Friday afternoon. IFR is creeping northward as well from the heart of the Gulf and reaching into places like Kodiak, maybe out toward Chignik, and then westward of Nunivak Island, St. Matthew, St. Paul, and St. George still hovering around IFR conditions with MVFR all the way down the chain in the Alaska Peninsula. It's still, though, the interior, the west, the northern passes, and really at least some of the northern edges of the Copper River Basin are generally going to be VFR, maybe changing to MVFR as we get into the afternoon there around the Copper River Basin, and again, most of South Central and the Parks Highway corridor. So keep your eye on that. Here's your pass conditions for your Thursday, though. As we saw, Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass are both listed at VFR. It looks pretty good there for your day tomorrow. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, on the other hand, probably IFR conditions through most of your Thursday. Looking a little bit further north, Rainy Pass, MVFR transitioning to IFR as the day goes on. Windy Pass should probably lean out to a little bit of a clearer kind of day there as we get into the afternoon. And same goes for Isabel Pass. Expect improving conditions. Mentasta Pass looks pretty good. Windy weather, maybe, probably some turbulence in the region, at least some low-level wind shear. But just keep your eye on that with some stronger gusts in the region. Tenita Pass, we expect to see a turn toward VFR as the day goes on. Portage Pass likely holding at IFR thanks to the moisture that's making its way in from the Prince William Sound side. And Chilkoot and White Pass, blustery. Probably some pretty strong wind gusts through the region there with that tight pressure gradient. But visibility should be okay, so if you're good with that. Here's a look at the freezing levels. A surface freezing line cutting right between St. Matthew and St. Paul, and then taking a jog down toward Port Heiden and Pilot Point, Kodiak Island, and then just along the outer coast of southeast there. The freezing levels aloft 2,000 feet, generally long and south of any Alaska coastline, sitting right over Haida Gwaii for your daytime tomorrow. Icing potential is there. The bulk of the moisture is really out across the west, though, and it levels above 3 to about 4,000 feet, 4 to 6,000 feet for the Gulf, and just kind of sneaking its way into the outer coast of southeast, maybe brushing Sitka and Port Alexander and down toward Craig and Klawock. Many other areas across southwest will be dealing with some isolated and light icing potential. They're generally between about 4 and 6,000 feet for your daytime tomorrow. Here's a jet, and the Pacific storm track is still taking a really big dive across the central and western North Pacific regions there, and then a broad southerly flow coming back into the Gulf. This is going to gradually work its way back into South Central and increase this ridging here across the Alcan and southeastern Alaska. So more moisture for more places, generally west of the Parks Highway, and continued cold and kind of windy weather for areas in the east. At 9,000 feet, you can see that southerly flow is setting up between about 30 and 40 knots across the Gulf for southeasterly winds about 10 to 25. More of an easterly flow for Kobuk and Noatak Valley regions down to southwestern Alaska. And a stronger easterly wind for the North Slope. You can see that at 3,000 feet as well, anywhere from about 15 to 20 knots. South and easterly winds across southwestern Alaska. Light winds for southeast, only 10 knots there, and about 25 knots across the Susitna Valley, with 25 to as strong as 50 knots across the central chain, wrapping around the core of low pressure there. So what does that do for turbulence? Our focus will still be over southeast because of the pressure gradient. A lot of low-level wind shear possibilities there. Considerable moderate from south central, Kodiak Island, southwest, all the way down toward Adak and Atka, and also for the Kobuk and Noatak River valleys there with a wind advisory in place. So hold on to the yoke and be careful. More of your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Another area where the Federal Aviation Administration is using technology in advancing aviation safety is in the use of remote weather cameras as a tool to aid pilots in making safe flight decisions. Hello, I'm Sheila Balistreri.
So in '99, we really started what we currently call the Alaska Weather Camera Program. We say Alaska because it's the only place in the FAA that has this. One, it's available through the internet so that the pilots, their family, their friends, they can all take a look at what the weather's like before you go there. In addition, we have all of that available within all of our flight service stations so that each flight service station technician can call up and look at weather real time. And with that, provide a better briefing, whether it's pre-flight or in-flight, for the pilots. By far the most popular thing we've ever done.
The weather camera system has been a good one. I'm sure you can tell from the, if you had access to the number of hits that they get that, on each site, that they're well used, and they save a lot of gasoline, they save a lot of time for passengers out turning around in weather and coming back when a pilot can just look at the camera and make a decision based on that rather than going out and actually looking at the weather.
When we look at the cameras, and if it's a definite no-go situation, then we're not able, we don't send an airplane out to take a look at it and then have to just spend the gas and the time and energy to go out, take a look at it, and just turn around and come back.
By placing weather cameras throughout the state, we've certainly come a long way. Today, we have 55 cameras throughout the state, an investment of $7 million. 12 new sites are scheduled to be up and running by this October. This concept, I think, is stunning in its simplicity. The pilot goes online and can view 2 images for each location. The first shows what the site would look like in a perfectly clear day situation. The second shows current weather conditions. Pilots can now learn what the visibility is in the mountain pass they face and whether they want to fly through it before they take off. In many instances, they may decide not to fly, to hold on that flight for a while, depending upon what they see. And that's long before they set foot in the aircraft.
Alaska is a huge state, and the area covered so far by weather cams is comparatively small. In order for the project to be completed, 165 already identified sites need to be added. In what may be considered counterintuitive, many of these weather cameras are not placed at airports, but are positioned in or near mountain passes and other geographical areas, which are often used by pilots as navigational aids. Others are located at rural airports, where there are no weather observers or co-located with automated weather systems. Pilots report that the value in these weather cameras is the real-time information they receive about destination and route conditions. Flight service specialists also have access to the weather camera images and routinely brief pilots with the most up-to-date information before takeoff and during their flight.
We use the weather cams in two basic ways here at the flight service station. For self-briefing, to get ready to be able to brief the pilots, to look at the weather cam where we have an airport with a weather report. We can compare what we see on the screen with what the weather report says. Where we do not have weather reports available, then we can look at the camera and again get a picture of what the weather is like at those locations.
When I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is pull up the weather cameras to all the destinations in the southeast and check that against the actual reports at that station, and it gives you a lot better picture of what the weather's doing than what we used to enjoy with just the observation. I'm sure all the pilots are doing the same thing. I know all of our pilots do. A well-placed camera looking in 3 different directions, there's nothing like that. Be able to see in real time what your weather actually looks like before you take off.
Cost benefit is quite a bit as far as saving us money. We don't launch a flight when we know that the weather is bad, when we can see it on the cameras that the weather is bad at our destination.
When the weather cam system was first proposed, there were some people who doubted its utility, and as they've come online, we've seen how the pilots really like to be able to see those pictures. They value it, and as they become available to us as briefers, we value it too.
I do thank you also for the cameras. I personally have used the cameras. I think that probably the one that's most used is the one over going through the pass into Lake Clark, and from time to time I get calls that it may not be functioning properly, which I'm pleased to say that Mr. Poe responds to very quickly.
During a recent independent study of Alaska pilots who have used the system, 68% reported making decisions to cancel or delay flights based on weather camera information. Pilots also reported that these decisions help them avoid additional fuel costs from flights that must be diverted or repeated due to bad weather. Now, these safety and economic advantages generated more than 2.3 million hits this past year on the FAA's Alaska WeatherCam website.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a quick check of your sea ice forecast, and as you look at the analysis for today, all the white areas, of course, are concentrations above 80%. One thing that's happening with a broad easterly flow and kind of shift to the north and west is pulling some of this higher concentration ice away from the coast. So we still have some areas of some marginal open water across Kotzebue Sound and outside of Norton Sound. You can see just a very light blue area there just south of Deering. But as you get west of the Bering Strait, you start to see a little bit more open water around St. Lawrence Island and points northward. But there's still some low concentration ice, probably even some open water here through the Bering Strait itself. So a lot of this, again, will be on the move from east to west. And Cook Inlet, there's still some interesting ice build up there across the northern parts of the inlet, north of the Forelands there. So watch for higher concentrations there. Anytime that you want to take a look and investigate the ice even more, that's the website to do it. Weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. It puts it on a Google map. You can zoom in, zoom out, go to the places you want, and bookmark it all, as well as reading outlooks for the next week or so to come, and even into the month or so to come. So make sure you check that out if you haven't recently. On to the marine forecast for southeast. Northerly, still gusty around Lynn Canal and through Stevens Passage, up to 50 knots or so. Seas about 4 to 7 feet in the region, 20 to 35 knots sustained. Offshore flow for the outer coast, anywhere from 25 to 30 knots, and 11 to 12 foot seas in most areas. You see those coming up to 18 feet, though, as we increase the winds around Friday with a stronger southeasterly flow parallel to the coastline. Looks like 35 to 40 knots in most areas. Gales will be the norm. 25 to 30 knots on the inside. Still looking at some stronger gusts in the region for Friday. And keep in mind, again, Friday night, a winter storm watch is moving in with a stationary boundary pretty close to the region. That'll be the focus for an opportunity for accumulating snow. So watch this space. Weather.gov/Juneau for the very latest information in southeast. For south central, winds will be stronger across the northern Gulf Coast, 30 to 40 knots. You're looking at 13 to 14 foot seas, 6 feet on the inside. of Prince William Sound with a steady easterly wind at 25 knots. Northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet, 30 to 40 knots there. And 12 to 14 foot seas expected on Thursday. Really not much of a change there on the inside of Cook Inlet for Friday. 30 knots with 7 foot seas in the open waters across the northern Gulf. Still looking at 35 to 40 knots and 18 to 19 foot seas expected there. Easterlies come up a bit more inside of Prince William Sound with seas to 6 feet. On Thursday for Bristol Bay, 30 knots with a 7 foot sea. All that blowing in from the north and east. Otherwise an east and southeast flow across most areas in the western Gulf, including Kodiak Island. You're looking at 12 foot seas around Shelikof Strait, 11 foot seas to the east, and 13 to 15 foot seas across the Pacific coast. That comes up even more on Friday. 17 to 19 foot seas there. Easterlies blowing across the region, 20 to 30 knots across the Bering Sea coast for Bristol Bay. Look for 7 foot seas in the region on Friday. Now, as we get out west, so once again, we've got low pressure working from west to east and kind of spinning its way around. That's going to get us an easterly wind for the eastern chain, a northeasterly wind for the central chain, and a northwesterly wind for the western chain. 20 knots there with 23 to 24 foot seas, anywhere from 13 to 21 foot seas across the Pacific coast with higher seas in the Pacific south of Adak and Kiska. As we get into Friday, things seem to settle down a little bit. We're getting into a broader northerly flow. The higher seas will be north and across the western parts of the Bering Sea. You're looking at 14 to 16 foot seas in the west, anywhere from 16 to 18, even 20 foot seas there south of Nikolsky, and 10 to 12 foot seas across the central and southern Bering Sea coast, anywhere from 15 to about 25 knot winds on Friday. Once you get a little bit further north, heavy freezing spray becomes a little bit more of a problem there. So south of St. Lawrence Island, north of Nunivak Island, out towards St. Matthew, east and northeasterly winds 25 to 30 with seas near the coast around 8 to 10 foot seas. St. Matthew and St. Paul, St. George looking at 14 foot seas on Thursday. Not much of a change on Friday. Again, heavy freezing spray still an issue, especially across the northern Bering. 10 to 13 foot seas expected with a 25 to 30 knot wind. Across the north over the ice, easterlies picking up across the Beaufort Sea coast, 10 to 20 there, and east to northeasterlies down the Chukchi coast, 15 to 25. Again, heavy freezing spray in the Bering Strait region near the open water. And Friday, very little change. Easterlies across the Beaufort at 15, an offshore easterly flow across the Chukchi Sea coast, 20 to 25 with a northeast wind in the Bering Strait, 30 knots with an 11 foot sea. Here's a look at tonight's map once again. Wind chill advisories for the Klondike Highway and the White Pass region especially. Wind chill values could hurt 50 below there. Looks like a winter storm watch is setting up for parts of southeast as well. That'll happen Friday night and into Saturday for accumulating snow. Wind chill advisory for the Deltana and Tanana Flats region around the Dalton Highway. Watch for values that could be as cold as 40 to 45 below, and an easterly wind for the upper and lower Koyukuk valleys into parts of the middle Yukon Valley. Could be blowing as strong as 40 knots from 40 miles an hour from the east. That's your Alaska weather. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.